Good morning, LIV Conference attendees and friends. As Haley said, I'm Dr. Sabapathy, and this is my lovely colleague and friend, Rennie.
Thank you. So excited to be here. This is one of many LIV conferences that I've attended throughout the years, and really looking forward just to connecting with you and sharing some insights, hoping that you have a few takeaways at the end of our presentation, and really looking at how, even though we may be caught up in a pandemic, how can we connect with one another?
Absolutely. Rennie, we've been trying to connect with our hospital, and I think one thing we want to really highlight this morning is in the last several months, we've made an opportunity to really try to be intentional with those on our team and people at our hospital. We love the people at Advent Health. They work so hard. So we've been trying to intentionally for the last month connect with our colleagues in these what we call care calls, where we take an opportunity to find an hour of time and speak about some of the challenges that are going on at this point in time, but be there to support. What this conference represents, the support, we're trying to offer that to our team members. So as we know, there's been a lot of changes, but it wasn't that long ago that we were at a different place. Let's take a look. Wow, Rennie, that was this year, right? That was
powerful.
Yeah. What are some of your takeaways on that?
Oh, I love the image of the children hanging from the school bus. They're all packed in there together. They're smiling, unmasked. It takes me back to many months ago.
Yeah, same. I didn't attend the Chiefs parade, but what a celebration that was. You were there. Okay, good. As well as many wonderful people, and it was cold, but it was a blast. And I look at that photo and I look at the celebration. I look at and think about that view from the airplane, and many of us haven't seen that view in a while, but I know we want to. But it makes me think about also, Rennie, where we are now. And where we are now is in a different place, and we need to acknowledge and honor that as well. Let's take a look at that. So that video, to me, Rennie, is equally powerful. Sure. It's equally powerful. I think about, driving in our wonderful city of Kansas City and the empty roads that we dealt with months ago, and we still have to deal with, as those images show, so many of that picture of that young girl on her bed, on her phone, by herself. I think, what are some of your thoughts, Rennie?
Well, it gets me right here when I watch that. And I think back to a time in February where my family gathered. We were at the high school basketball game, cheering on our favorite team.
Yeah.
And right beside me to my left was my 80-year-old father, 80-year-old father. And he was there to watch his granddaughter who was in the homecoming court. And we were packed into the stands. We were having a great time. And lo and behold, she did get crowned the queen.
Wow. Yeah.
And I looked over at my father, and the smile that he had on his face is forever embedded in my mind. He was so proud. He didn't miss a volleyball game, and since she was like 7 years old, or any of the grandchildren's events. And that relationship between a grandparent and a grandchild, so powerful, so unique.
Yeah.
Fast forward about 2 weeks, our family's gathering again, and this time we're going to celebrate his 81st birthday. And unfortunately, my father passed away on his birthday, and what a devastating loss. We were not prepared for that. I will tell you that I really struggled. I continue to struggle. And then we fast forward 2 more weeks, and the World Health Organization announces the global pandemic.
March 11th.
It's like March 11th. It's like, wow, how much more could I take? I wasn't sure I was going to get through this. And so the grief process started, and in a time where typically I would be together with my brothers and we would be sharing stories, we had to do that all through the phone and really be creative in ways to connect because we no longer could get together. When an individual, and whether it's loss from a death or if it's a loss from a change in our environment and our society,
Right.
or if it's a loss, maybe you move across town and you've left your neighborhood. You think about that first grader who didn't get to end their first grade, had that last day of school celebration.
Right.
Loss can be defined in many different ways. And Kubler-Ross identified 5 different stages of loss. Many of us know those. For me personally, I definitely was in shock and in denial initially. But pretty quickly, I found myself moving into the anger stage. Angry that this is happening in my life.
Right.
It's not fair. My husband might say I was a little irritable. He might say I'm still a little irritable. I don't know about that. I hope not. I definitely, another stage that I didn't necessarily touch on was bargaining. I wasn't pleading with God or anyone to bring my father back, but I was struggling to get to that point of acceptance where I could actually say, I'm not okay with his death, but I will be okay. And it took a while. There were days where I didn't want to get out of bed. I didn't want to go to work. I was in healthcare, and so I needed to go in and be with the patients and my team members. And so I really struggled. And so I think, Dr. Sabapathy, it's that feeling of emptiness, and then we couple it with being at home and being alone. It's a real struggle.
It certainly can be. It can certainly be a real struggle. And I think one of those struggles leads to these consequences of potentially disconnection. So one of the aspects that I think about, Rennie, when I hear you speak about grief, is that we get less engaged, we're less present, we feel like we're going through the motions. And those are all symbols and signs and images of disconnection. And disconnection can be very subtle.
Oh, yeah.
It initially can start off as, I'm a little fatigued, I'm a little bit worn down, but then over time there's this erosion of the soul that starts to take over, and we start to feel this sense of maybe that loss of something, we can't quite put our finger on it. As time unfortunately goes on and we have more of this loneliness or isolation, which are some of these consequences of disconnection, that can unfortunately, if we don't acknowledge it and we don't honor it, it can unfortunately lead to some deeper symptoms, Rennie, of depression and anxiety. So I think it's really important to understand and acknowledge our world really has been turned upside down, hasn't it?
Amazing, in so many different ways.
So many.
Really. Yeah, I think we reflect back on our normal routines, sending the kids off to school, gathering in the backyard for a barbecue,
Right.
Going to sporting events, gathering in church. Such a sad scene earlier to see the empty pews.
Oh, yeah.
And so we reflect on the good times, and we have to pause and think, what can we do to be connected, to get reconnected? And although we may still be physically distancing, there are many ways, and we're seeing our society, our community, really step up and be creative in ways that can get us back together.
We have an amazing community, don't we?
Amazing.
We do. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Absolutely, yes.
So go right ahead.
Yeah, no, as we continue, I think what's important to understand is as we move through this time, how do we, if we've been disconnected, how do we get into this stage of connection? And we believe that connection has some very specific benefits to our overall health and well-being. And so for us, Rennie, we often deal with the emotional health and behavioral health, which I think we are living in a day and age that people appreciate and value that so much more. And that I appreciate and value that as well, right? So that we can appreciate that our emotional health and well-being with the sense of comfort and the sense of community. There's literature that says when we come together and we are with one another, face to face, not FaceTime, face to face time together, that we're with each other, that builds a sense of cohesion and community and comfort. And so it's important to try to find ways, if we're limited, Rennie, in ways to do that, how can we be intentional to find those ways to connect? There's more even great research about how cardiac health and cognitive health, brain health, can be improved. So there's this concept, Rennie, called vasodilation. And basically what that means is your blood vessel can open up and the blood can flow through even smoother and more efficiently. And it just makes you kind of feel better. So we know that connection can help with a sense of cardiac health, brain health. It even helps release certain neurotransmitters that we have in our brain, such as dopamine and oxytocin, and these can help you get that sense of comfort by being connected. It's incredible how important connection is for human beings.
Absolutely. And I think of another release, just getting together.
Yes.
Being together and having some laughter is a form of relief and can lower that stress level.
Absolutely.
So, yeah. When we talk about connection, it is actually an internal feeling. So you think about isolation being a state of being, whereas loneliness is really a feeling that can be generated or come about based on being alone.
Right.
Our previous Surgeon General, Dr. Murthy, had several years ago took a listening tour across America. He wanted to learn more about what Americans were feeling about health. And so he went out and he went into small rural communities and large cities and talked. And of course, he heard many stories about heart disease, diabetes, the opioid epidemic. But the thing when he returned to his office that he said was most surprising was the sense of loneliness across America. And he found through some research that 22% of Americans feel lonely.
Wow.
And so this was years before the pandemic, there was this feeling of loneliness, and now here we are in the middle of the pandemic, and of course, we're all feeling somewhat lonely.
So Rennie, I was just thinking as you said that, so this is even before the pandemic, that things like isolation and loneliness, which I've seen isolation considered as a public health crisis, that's what you're acknowledging, correct?
Absolutely. And I think it was really interesting to listen to his interview and for him to acknowledge it was even a surprise. Gosh, he's a Surgeon General, and he was very surprised.
Right, absolutely.
And so when we talk about feeling alone, you might have 1,000 friends, but still you can have that sense of alone. You also might only have a handful of friends, or maybe none, and feel very connected. And so it is individually based, and it's very internal. It comes from within.
So Rennie, maybe what someone needs, maybe what I need for connection may be different than what someone else needs for connection.
Absolutely.
Absolutely, okay.
Yeah, I was thinking back to walking through those busy airports that you referenced, and you may be surrounded and in close proximity to a ton of people, yet feeling very alone. Or if I'm at a Chiefs game, which I thoroughly enjoy in the past, and I'm around, 70,000 people, and I'm high-fiving strangers, and I don't know their names, I don't know them, but I'm connecting because we have a common interest. And there are times where we need to seek out common interest if we are feeling disconnected.
There's a concept called groupthink. In groupthink, we come together when we have this common goal and this commonality in mind that brings us together. The celebrations, being at a LIV conference, even as we are today, how it brings people together with this same purpose and this same drive. I think it really validates what you're saying.
It does. So in terms of social benefits, do you want to speak some of why is it important to be connected?
Yeah, absolutely.
We need to give these ladies some tips here.
Yeah, absolutely. We all need some reminders every now and again. So let's talk about the benefits of social connection, and then we'll get into some of those tips and ideas. So some of the benefits of social connection is we really want to improve our quality of life. Who doesn't want to improve their quality of life? When you and I take care of patients all day, we're really trying to enhance that sense of quality. Well, what we really want to highlight today is that sense of quality enhances when you have that sense of connection. And then it boosts your emotional, as we talked about, the mental health. And actually, Rennie, so this is appropriate. Women live 6 to 8 years longer, according to some of the research, right?
Yes, that's right, women.
Absolutely. And so, the question is, why is that? Is it because women are more positive than men? Maybe. Are they healthier than men? Maybe. Well, really, what the literature validates is there's an intentionality and a self-prioritization of connecting with other individuals.
And women, for the most part, do a pretty good job. The thing I miss about the LIV conference in person is that energy. where women are connecting, and sometimes we even have a hard time getting folks into the next speaker because they're out socializing and connecting and telling stories. And I love the women that show up in their matching T-shirts and the shoes. Laura, we love the shoes. LIV represents connection to me. It really does.
Yeah, I feel that.
Yeah.
I feel that as a part of the conference, that it represents connection and that sense of living in vitality, right? Absolutely.
Right. So you earlier mentioned the care calls that we do, and those are the calls where we have healthcare members from our teams call in on the phone, and we offer support. Dr. Sabapathy, myself, and our colleague, the ICU manager, Kirsten, we take on a variety of calls, and we format that around cares.
And I think, Rennie, one of the reasons I feel so blessed to do this with you here today, and it's just an opportunity to show that we've been showing a lot of care to one another, and that these calls offer this opportunity to show compassion, right? To show this sense of kindness, that we have this genuine regard for other people. And there's this sense of acceptance. I love how you talk about acceptance. Can you speak about that a touch?
Well, for me, back with the loss of my father, I could stay stuck, or I could move into, this is my new reality. I don't like it very well, but I have to focus on, as do you, what do we have control over and what we don't. I have control over whether or not I wear a mask, or I don't, of course I do, or whether or not I go out socially, and then trying to find the good, and finding that good in what is going on today, staying really focused on today, being mindful that I'm living in the present, not what's going to be our world in 6 months from now. I don't know.
And Rennie, to that point, I think if we start thinking about 6 months from now, we go out into the future. And what you and I know is that if we go too far into the future, that produces anxiety.
Sure.
That produces a sense of uncertainty, more so. So how do we, it's challenging, right? But how do we embrace some of the adversity that's here? How do we accept what's occurring? Control the controllables. That's something we often talk about in different parts of sports and business, is how do I control the controllables? And so this is an important opportunity to do that. And maybe also, Rennie, to do that without a sense of judgment, without a sense of wanting to really over-assess or over-analyze too much.
That can be hard.
That can be
hard.
Well, there's a lot of bright people watching this right now, and there's a lot of number of people that really do want to see a different time. But I think if we can have the sense of purpose and presence, that can make a difference. Which maybe that offers us an opportunity to respect a little bit of where we're at. So what we really try to do is show a lot of respect to others. But Rennie, what about the respect that we need to show to ourselves? Can you touch upon that a little bit too?
Right. The key connection is truly the relationship that we have for ourselves. And if you can be confident in who you are and how you're handling situations, the more ready you're going to be to face any problem that may present.
Absolutely. I think that's a great way to describe it. And then our last pillar, these are our 4 pillars of care. Our last pillar is this important E, and this is empathy. But I want to highlight here with empathy that we are trying to be compassionate and accepting and respectful. And that's a way, Rennie, that we try to show empathy. But we also have to be aware of empathy or even compassion fatigue as we're going through this. And that's one reason at our hospital, at Advent Health, that we're trying to make sure that we are there for our team members, our medical staff, our nurses, anyone within the walls of our hospital we want to empathize with. But I think an important point to really drive home here is, are you giving care to yourself? It really does start with us. So if we talk about that state of mind, Rennie, maybe that helps set a tone for that state of mind and giving ourselves and acknowledging care for us.
Absolutely. You know, another thing that comes to mind is joy and the role that joy plays in being connected.
Yeah.
And I think about that coherence or that feeling of being one, being a whole. When things are out of sorts, we don't feel that sense of belonging. We feel disconnected, really.
We feel disconnected.
And so when we experience joy, it tends to bring us together. We also think, and you mentioned purpose, pausing each day and really thinking about what your purpose is. You know, my purpose today was to get in the car and come to North Kansas City and be together with you. My purpose later in the day will change, but all along, I'm going to try to find the positive in it.
And maybe one of our purposes also, and especially for those watching, is can we be purposeful about connections? Can we be purposeful about, and hopefully we're delivering today, that a connection isn't just an opportunity to help us feel better about who we're with. It can help us feel better about who we are and what we're doing. So also that sense of joy, and there's a lot of research now on joy, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, there's a lot, finding and maintaining joy, there's a lot of research on it, and one of the aspects of that is camaraderie, Rennie. I love our camaraderie, right? I mean,
you know, Doctor, when you showed up this morning, I'm thinking we are spending way too much time together when we match clothing.
Right,
So,
right.
Anyway, yeah, there is a strong sense of camaraderie and what we're seeing in the community. And I think about, you know, when we pause and go, what can we do right now in difficult times? And we think about the creative things our community has done. In my neighborhood, I arrived home one evening and chalk art happened to be the theme. And I drove in and my daughter had painted her Jeep on the driveway and said, difficult roads often lead to beautiful destinations. And boy, did I need that at that moment in time. I really needed to see it. And when we went for a walk, numerous neighbors had started chalking their driveways. And so whether or not I knew everyone in the neighborhood, I had this sense of connection just from something that was written on the ground.
These are, to me, Rennie, messages of care and messages of regard, and so powerful. What beautiful artwork. You got some creative folks around your neighborhood.
Yes, we do.
Yeah.
You know, I also heard stories of folks putting bears in the window to show for when families took small children. They played I Spy, and they were picking out in the different windowsills. And I'm like, that's pretty creative.
Text that to me later. That's a great idea.
Get that bear out, right?
Absolutely.
So we've talked about how the sense of connection is an internal feeling. And I think back to a time not too long ago where visitors were not allowed in our hospitals for very important reasons, and how hard that would be for the family members. And so another creative approach was when a local church gathered members to come to the parking lots of different hospitals, and they arrived at Advent Health in full force. I was so impressed. I was there in the parking lot.
I bet a number were there who are watching this right now.
I wish you guys could do a show of hands or maybe put in the chat if you were there. And so the cars came into the parking lot and gathered to cheer on the patients who were struggling in the hospital and to pray for those patients and for the healthcare workers, for the housekeepers, the radiologists, the lab workers, our nurses. And I didn't know everyone in the parking lot, but again, felt this sense of connection. And at one point during the evening, up on the 8th floor, we see this bright light. And a nurse or a clinical associate, someone had turned on their flashlight on their cell phone and was waving it back and forth.
Oh, wow, yeah.
I have no idea who that person was, but everyone outside felt a connection and a purpose of what we were doing there on that given day.
Well, I completely agree, and I'll be honest, our healthcare workers are incredibly strong and resilient people. But I think at that point, Rennie, when I think back a few months, and even as I think back today, those messages, that community camaraderie, that was so meaningful for so many, because they were doing so much for so many for so long. And to get something back like that from our wonderful community, what a way for our community to take action with us.
So we might think about, I totally agree, what can the women on the call today, what can they do if they're like, okay, so I'm not going to drive to the hospital parking lot, but I want to do something in my neighborhood or within my small community. One thing that pops into my mind is writing a handwritten note. I think sometimes notes are a thing of the past because we're so used to texting, but writing a note and putting it on the door or on the porch of someone who lives alone. That would be a great way of letting that person know you're cared about.
To your point, well, and to that point, we know through some of our other research that actually writing, right, getting back to writing, actually helps release, right? Absolutely. And so when I think about writing that note, I think about not just giving to someone else, but what that gives to us back in return. But let's go back to that word, Rennie, intentional for a moment. I think, my goodness, time goes fast. that beautiful picture of your daughter and your, I think time goes quick, right? So we have to be intentional and purposeful to know what we need to do. So if it's maybe texting someone that you care about, or checking in with a family member, or dropping something off at a doorstep, I think we still live in a day and age of wash your hands, wear your mask, and watch your distance, those 3 W's, right, right, Rennie, that we need to do more of those things. So if you're still practicing distancing, which we really encourage you to do those things that can share your message, but you're respecting the distancing that we need to do right now.
Right.
Yeah.
And when we think about, can we find the good in all of this? You have anything to share about your family?
Yeah, so what's so interesting about this crew here is, and that's my wife Misty in the middle, and that's Maya in the pink, and that's Mira in the, I think that's gray, right? So that's it goes fast again, like I mentioned. And so when I talk about the fastness of life, or the speed, Rennie, there are so many nights that we're racing from activity to event to sport to homework to mom and dad's work, and sometimes that brushes into the evening. But I think what we really tried to do, and I hope this picture really emulates and exemplifies, is we tried to come together. Now you see, I must have lost because I'm not in the picture, right? I must have got out of the game early, right? They beat me. So, but I think it's, and a really nice backstory to that is one of our close neighbors and friends, the Hodges, brought that over to us and dropped that on our front porch. And so that's that kind of giving back that we were referring to. And there we are, and my wonderful girls just having a good time. It's meaningful.
Absolutely.
It's meaningful.
Absolutely. So when we talk about connection and the importance of it, we ask each of you to pause and think about things that you can do deliberately, maybe make a list, and commit to making a difference, to taking action. In doing that, we really believe that it will benefit you and your well-being, because as you mentioned, our own well-being is so very important.
It's so important. And the self-care that we give, and maybe also, Rennie, give yourself grace.
Offer grace, absolutely.
Offer grace. If there's ever a time right now, there are so many people that are watching us right now that, again, do so much for so many, for so long. Give yourself some grace. Give yourself some understanding. You're doing more than you're giving yourself credit for, I promise. You are too, Rennie. You've been absolutely amazing and wonderful to work with in this journey.
Ditto. Yeah. When you talk about offering grace, I think of all the parents, and I actually have a college student now, so I'm not having to worry.
I'll be there next year.
Not quite worrying about whether or not she got her home. Well, I hope she gets her homework done. But I think about the parents that are trying to juggle, working, getting the Zoom meeting set up, making sure the assignments are submitted correctly, and then of course we have the ever so often internet interruption, as we've experienced, and I think about the level of stress and how those individuals are feeling. And sometimes we have to remember that we will get through this. We are in this together, and whether or not we're in a pandemic or you may be struggling with something totally unrelated, that we need to have that camaraderie, that sense of we are in this together.
When you described the LIV conference to me in the past, Rennie, which I know you've attended quite regularly,
yes.
Right? I think that's what the conference really represents, is being able to come together and have camaraderie and take a day off during the week, right? And actually be together and connect. But to go back to something you highlighted, it is important to adapt and adjust right now. One of our mottos at Advent Health is that humans are incredible. And one reason humans are incredible is that ability, Rennie, right, to adapt and adjust and pivot. I think what we really want to highlight today is connections can help us pivot. Please ask for support. Don't do things alone. Reach out to your friends and neighbors. Look at it as honoring, not bothering, right? So when I call you and I ask for something, like I often do, I try to remind myself, my initial thought is, I don't want to bother Rennie, but now I'm saying, I want to honor Rennie.
That's a nice reframing. That really is. And I think if all of us can keep that in mind, because women, as we know, don't always want to ask for help. And it's time. Let's band together. And if anyone today is really struggling, you do know that there is professional help, and Dr. Sabapathy and I would be more than happy to visit with you about resources that are available and to get you connected if you really are stuck like I was a couple of months ago.
I think that's such an important part to end on. So thankful to be here today with you, Rennie. Our message to leave you with is please, please make connection a part of your agenda. Thank you for allowing us to be here.
Thank you, ladies.